All right, so are you ready to dive into something kind of, well, a little unsettling?
Unsettling, like what?
Seduction. When you sent over The Art of Seduction by Robert Greene, I was a little hesitant.
Really? Why is that?
I mean, I wasn't sure what to expect, but let me tell you, this book, it's amazing.
I can see why you'd be hesitant with a title like that, but yeah, Greene really gets into it.
Yeah, it's like this deep dive into, like, what makes people tick, even the dark side.
Yeah, totally. And it's not just about like romantic stuff either.
Right, exactly. And to help us unpack all of this, I mean, we have you here.
Oh, I'm happy to be here.
So right off the bat, one of the things that jumped out at me was how Green defines seduction,
hmm
because it's not just about like romance, is it?
No, not at all. It's way broader. It's about influence and power dynamics, really.
Okay, interesting. So less about like candlelit dinners and more about understanding desire.
Exactly. And Greene, he breaks this down with these 9 seducer types.
Oh yeah, the sirens, the rakes. It's
In
like straight out of a movie.
Right. Each one, like, with their own way of, wielding this power of attraction.
Okay, so let's get into it. Let's start with the siren. I mean, that's a classic.
Yeah, the classic. Alluring and dangerous, like using that mix of sexuality and a little bit of forbidden.
It's like Marilyn Monroe. That image she had, pure siren. Yes.
Absolutely. And Greene goes beyond just describing it. He explains why it works.
It's not just the looks, it's the psychology behind it.
Right. Now, on the other hand, you've got the rake.
Like Casanova, right.
Yeah.
The charmer, I mean, notorious.
Yeah, exactly. Wit, charisma, rebellion, that's his blend.
And Green even breaks down, like, how Casanova seduced Miss Pauline, doesn't he?
He does, and it's fascinating how he plays on her repressed desires, like what society tells her she shouldn't want.
So it's like playing with those boundaries.
Yeah, exactly. It can be super seductive. Now, what about the ideal lover?
Yeah. What about them? I'm curious how they fit in.
They're all about creating that fantasy, that romantic ideal, catering to desires.
Like Rudolph Valentino, that silent film star. It's like he was selling a dream.
Exactly. And the key is keeping that illusion alive,
Right.
giving people what they're missing.
Okay, that makes sense. And then there's the dandy. That one really got me thinking.
The dandy, yeah, they're fascinating. All about ambiguity, challenging those norms.
Like Oscar Wilde, with his style and like that whole persona he cultivated,
Exactly. They refuse to be categorized, and that can be so alluring.
offering something different. Okay, so we've got these types, but Green also uses all these historical examples, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, you can't talk about seduction without Cleopatra.
Right,
Yeah.
the ultimate example. Right, I mean, to influence those powerful men like Caesar and Antony,
It wasn't just her beauty, though. It was calculated. She used it as a tool.
like that story of her meeting Caesar rolled up in a rug, right?
Oh, yeah, talk about a grand entrance. She knew how to make an impression. And she was incredibly intelligent, too.
So it wasn't just appearances for her.
No, not at all. She could hold her own in any conversation. She was playing on multiple levels. Intelligence, charisma, everything.
Wow, it's like a master class.
Then there's Madame de Pompadour. Imagine being the official mistress to King Louis the Fifth for years.
Oh, wow. That's got to be tough. How'd she do it?
Greene talks about how good she was with novelty, with keeping things interesting.
Oh, so like keeping the king engaged.
Yeah. Parties, new art trends, even backing his political moves.
So she was smart, appealing to his mind, more than just looks.
Exactly. To keep that influence, you've got to adapt and evolve.
Okay, I'm starting to see the bigger picture here.
Hmm.
So we've got these types, these historical figures, but Green also dives into the darker side of seduction, right?
He does.
Yeah.
Because as amazing as these techniques can be, they can be used to manipulate.
Right, because it's like a powerful tool. You've got to be careful with it.
Exactly. And Greene, he lays out some techniques that can be, well, a little unsettling.
Okay, like what? Give me an example.
Well, he talks about strategic weakness, like appearing vulnerable.
Wait, appearing weak to seduce someone. I don't get it.
It sounds counterintuitive, but think about it. When we see someone who's weak, we want to help them.
Oh, okay, I see what you mean.
Greene uses the example of Sergei Saltykov, winning over Catherine the Great when she was feeling insecure. He was the sympathetic rescuer.
So it's about playing on their empathy, their desire to help.
Exactly. And it works because it can create a sense of dependency. The target starts to rely on the seducer.
Wow. I never thought of it that way. That's kind of scary.
Right. And then there's isolating the victim, cutting them off from their usual support system.
So they're more vulnerable to your influence.
Yeah, you're creating a vacuum, and then you step in to fill it.
That's getting into some dark territory. Okay, what else?
Stirring up the transgressive and taboo.
Like the bad boy image?
Exactly. It's the allure of the forbidden breaking the
I
rules.
can see that. It's exciting.
Think about Lord Byron, the poet. All those rumors just made him more appealing.
So it's about risk, excitement. Okay, this last one's a little wild. Mixing pleasure with pain.
It is, but think about it. Sometimes a little pain can actually heighten pleasure, make you more attached.
I don't know about that one.
Greene uses the example of Yang Fei, the Chinese concubine. She would use anger, tears, even distance to manipulate the emperor.
I was like a roller coaster of emotions.
Yeah, it keeps them hooked. The target is always trying to please the seducer.
Okay, so we've got these archetypes, these historical figures, these techniques. It makes you wonder, are we all being seduced on some level every day?
That is the question, isn't it? And I think, yeah, probably. It's not always this calculated, manipulative thing. It can be subtle, just a part of how we interact.
You know, as I was reading the book, I started seeing it everywhere, like in advertising. They use these tactics all the time.
Oh, absolutely. Think about how they present products, creating that aura, appealing to our desires, insecurities.
Yeah, it's like they know our deepest desires and use that to manipulate us.
And social media is a huge one, too.
It's true. We're all curating these perfect versions of ourselves, trying to attract attention.
It's like we're all playing the game now, whether we realize it or not.
So what do we do? I mean, how do we navigate all this?
It starts with awareness. The more you understand these techniques, the better you can recognize them and decide how to respond.
So it's not about being paranoid, it's about being aware.
Exactly. Knowledge is power, right? The more we understand this game, the better we can play it, or even change the rules of the game, right?
Exactly. But, you know, something that stuck with me from the book was the focus on observation.
Oh, yeah.
Like Greene says, a master seducer, they're also a master observer,
It's true. They're always watching, paying attention.
picking up on those little cues.
Exactly. And it's not just about, like, body language or what they're saying.
It's more than that.
It's about understanding the whole picture, the context,
The social dynamics.
Right, the power dynamics, too.
Like becoming a detective of human behavior.
Yeah, exactly. You're piecing together the puzzle of what makes them tick.
In Greene, he doesn't just focus on romantic seduction either, right? He talks about how this applies to all sorts of things.
Absolutely. It's everywhere.
Like take charismatic leaders, people who can inspire a whole movement.
Oh, yeah. Or those master negotiators, the ones who can close any deal.
Are they using these techniques on purpose, or is it just something they do naturally?
It's hard to say, right? It's like, is it strategy or just their personality?
It makes you think about authenticity, you know?
Mhm.
Can you ever really know someone's true intentions?
It's a good question. I mean, is it better to be loved for who you are, flaws and all, or admired for a persona, even if it's not totally real?
Right. It's like what's more important
That's something we all have to think about, I guess, how we present ourselves to the world.
than how we see others, right?
Absolutely.
Something else that really got me thinking was the idea of power dynamics.
Oh, yeah, Greene talks a lot about that.
He says, seduction often creates this imbalance of power.
Right, where one person has more influence or control than the other.
And that can be a good thing, right?
Sometimes, yeah, like when a leader uses that influence to inspire people to do something positive.
Or to build strong relationships.
Exactly. But when it's used to manipulate or exploit, that's when it gets dangerous.
So it's about finding that balance, right? Using that influence ethically.
Definitely. You have to understand the techniques, but also the ethical side of it.
Okay, so if we're thinking about our listener, what are some key takeaways here? Some things they can actually use?
I think the biggest one is just awareness. Pay attention to those subtle dynamics of seduction.
Like those things we were just talking about?
Yeah. In your relationships, the media you consume, everywhere. Notice how people use language, body language, even their surroundings to influence you.
It's like becoming a student of human behavior,
Yeah.
you know? Always observing, analyzing, learning.
Exactly. And the more you observe, the better you'll get at navigating it all. The second takeaway is using this ethically. Think about how you can use this to create positive change.
So not just for personal gain, but to actually do some good in the world.
Right. And the last thing I would say is think about your own vulnerabilities. What makes you susceptible to these tactics?
So like knowing your weaknesses, that's important.
It is. It's about self-awareness and critical thinking. The more you understand the game, the more control you have.
It's like taking back your power.
Exactly.
It really is.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like Greene gave us this map to like decode human behavior.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder, how much of our lives is shaped by this stuff, even when we don't realize it.
Oh, totally. Like, think about those really charismatic leaders, the ones who can inspire, like, a whole movement.
Right. Or even just like a really good negotiator, someone who can close any deal.
Yeah. Do you think they're, like, using these techniques consciously, or is it just part of who they are?
That's a tough one. Is it strategy or is it just like their natural charm?
I don't know.
Yeah.
But it really makes you think about authenticity.
Oh, absolutely. Like, can you ever really know someone's true intentions if they're like that good at this stuff?
Yeah, it's like, what's more important? Being loved for who you really are, even if you're kind of messy.
Or being admired for this like perfect persona that you've created?
Right. Even if it's not totally real. It's a tough question.
It is. And it's something we all have to grapple with, I think.
Definitely. Both in how we present ourselves and in how we, like, judge other people.
Yeah, totally.
One thing that keeps coming back to me is this idea of power.
Power.
Yeah, like the power dynamics in these interactions.
Yeah.
Greene talks about how seduction can create these imbalances.
Oh, for sure. Where one person has more control or influence than the other.
Exactly. And sometimes that can be okay, right? Like, if a leader uses that influence to inspire people,
Yeah, to do something good for the world.
or even just to build strong relationships.
Right. But when it's used to manipulate or hurt people, that's when it becomes a problem.
It's like walking this fine line,
Yeah.
between influence and manipulation.
It is. You have to be aware of the ethical implications for sure. You can't just learn these techniques and then go out and use them without thinking about the consequences.
It's like, how do you use this knowledge for good?
Exactly.
So, if our listeners are taking away one thing from this conversation, what should it be?
I think it's awareness, honestly. Just start paying attention to how these dynamics play out in your own life.
Yeah, like those things we were just talking about, the
Mhm.
power imbalances, the manipulation tactics.
Exactly. Notice how people use language, body language, even their environment to influence you.
It's like becoming a student of human behavior.
Exactly. And the more you observe, the more you'll start to see those patterns and the better you'll be at navigating them.
So it's not about being paranoid, it's about being informed.
Right. And then you can start to think about, okay, how can I use this knowledge ethically? How can I make sure I'm not like accidentally manipulating people?
And how can you make sure you're not being manipulated?
Exactly. It's about protecting yourself, too.
Yeah. Wow. This has been, I don't know, eye-opening, for sure.
It's a lot to think about.
It is, and I feel like we've only just scratched the surface, honestly. The Art of Seduction. It's a deep book with lots to unpack.
Oh, yeah. It really makes you question a lot of things about like human nature.
And power and ethics.
For sure.
Well, a huge thank you to our listener for sending this one over. It's been a wild ride.
It has.
And to everyone listening, let us know what you think. Have you noticed any of these things happening in your own life?
Yeah. Has this conversation changed how you see things?
We'd love to hear your thoughts. Keep those minds curious, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.